we have this, I think some people from the West have this sort of false belief about Latin America and maybe other places where it's like they're all poor, they need our help, they're all poor, they need our help, and it's kind of a shit show, like the way the country, and yeah, I mean, if you're not putting things on a scale,
it's kind of refreshing that way, because you can go talk to anybody and you don't have that feeling like, oh, this is a big shot. Like,
we had some rumors which somewhat turned out to be true about planned power outages in Ecuador. I would hear foreigners around Vilcabamba in particular, who there's like this sort of echo chamber, sort of rumor mill in Vilcabamba. It's a small town, maybe that's true in other places, I don't know, but it's definitely, maybe it's heightened here because people are living in a foreign country, don't necessarily speak the language or understand the culture, and so
we're in a social media society as well. Like, so people they're on Facebook and they're spreading stuff, and there's no due diligence on things.
The Citizens Assembly was able to get I think it was the general of the military, of the Navy, the police chiefs from Loja, the whole province, like very high-ranking officials into a meeting, and they said, how can we help? Like, they needed help, and
in Vilcabamba.
They came to
Yeah, and there are people in Vilcabamba who would do the same, for sure. I believe so. I mean, I'm on those WhatsApp groups that I've mentioned before, the security groups, and whenever, there was something, I forget what it was, but there was some suspicious activity going on, and some community members were like, let's find these guys and burn them, basically.
Yeah.
The police are not revenue generators for the state, so that allows also for those relationships to be very different. Like the police here are literally there to protect you. Like, they're actually there for your safety, not to give you a ticket because you forgot to put your turn.
She wanted to ride, but I said, well, can you go in the back? And I knew there were transitos sometimes, transit police on the way. So anyways, I'm like, but what about the transitos, the transit police? Are they not gonna bother me if they're? And she's like, oh no, I know them, no problem, I'll talk to them. And that happens all the time, right? It's kind of very, I've had people tell me like, oh, if the transitos stop you, just give me a call.
Hello and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. It's weird trying to look at the camera from the side. I'm going to you guys. I'm starting with you guys. That's it. We're done with the cameras for the day.
Thanks.
Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining us. Should I look back?
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Who are you? Did you forget who you are sitting on that side of the table?
It's not my good side. So Jesse, Carl, Brandon, guys, thanks for tuning in. Right now, take a minute, hit like, please. Put a like on the video. Helps our channel, helps our content. We do put in a lot of time and effort to bring you guys the real deal, the on-the-ground look and information, the inside scoop, so to speak, on life here in Ecuador, in Vilcabamba. Put a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell as well so you get the notifications. Interesting times here in the valley. We have just transitioned in the last couple of weeks into rainy season. You guys can see the mountains are starting to green up here.
It's amazing how quick, eh?
Yeah.
Like, I could tell the difference.
Even that first big rain we had, it was already quite a bit greener 24 hours later.
Still not as green as it gets, though.
No.
It gets bright, lush, vibrant green.
Yeah, it's probably, about halfway between brown and green at this point, 60%, something like that.
Yeah.
But the rivers are still not muddy and calm, so I still get to go do that. Sometimes when it rains a lot, the rivers get unusable for a day or two here and there, much to my chagrin. I was recently in Quito, which was kind of a funny set of events. So my daughter was in the States. She was traveling to visit family for about 6 weeks, and she's 15. She travels by herself. And by the way, now as a 15-year-old, she doesn't even need to be an unaccompanied minor anymore, which is nice.
At 15?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. So she needs the paperwork to leave the country as a minor, but the airline doesn't require anything extra at all.
Okay.
So she can fly Quito, Florida, New York, no problem, and back.
Nice.
Without anything, which is kind of nice. Yeah, they're also, by the way, they're going to start back the Guayaquil Loja flight, which
Ooh.
is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. For sure.
Well,
When?
I mean, Milton was telling me about
Cool.
it,
Awesome.
and I mean, it sounded like it was for sure. It's a different airline. He told me which one. I forget which one it is,
Okay,
but
not Aero Regional.
no.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget which one, but it's a
There's
different airline.
LATAM also flies sometimes.
Yeah, I think for some reason I don't think it was LATAM because I would have registered that. It was an airline that I had barely heard of, so.
It was not Avianca. Can we just keep naming
Yeah,
airlines?
just keep naming American.
Well, yeah, probably not American.
Probably not
Airlines,
American.
but the little ones that are flying
Right.
nationally.
Ido, Ecuador. So that's great. Like they used to have, I fly in and out of New York when I go back to the States, and they have direct flights between New York and Guayaquil, but then getting here from Guayaquil was a pain. So supposedly starting around January or something like that, they're going to start that flight back, which they had for years, and then discontinued at one point when the government airline went bankrupt. Surprise, surprise. And now we're stuck between Quito. Anyway, so I had to go to Quito to pick up my daughter because she can't stay in a hotel and do all that stuff by herself. So, the day before I'm supposed to fly, I'm buying tickets to go fly to Quito and get my daughter, which normally is not a problem at all. Like normally there's always seats available, but it's the Day of the Dead holiday weekend, which is a big thing here. I would almost relate it to our Thanksgiving, really, because what they do in Ecuador around Day of the Dead is that everybody goes back to where they're from if they don't live there. Everybody goes home to where mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and stuff like that are. And they spend a holiday weekend together. It's like Thursday through Sunday, type of thing.
I mean, didn't it start here on Wednesday? I think this festivity started here in Vilca on Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah, because they pushed back the actual date was, I think it was Tuesday and Wednesday actually, but they pushed it to Thursday and Friday to turn into a holiday weekend.
Gotcha.
But so the feriado, the people had time off on Thursday, Friday.
Sure. The party definitely started Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Wednesday here, yeah. Well, it's funny. I was at this hotel. So anyway, I couldn't get a flight back. I could get a flight to Quito. I couldn't get a flight back to Loja.
So what'd you do?
So I'm staying in Quito for a couple of days.
Oof.
Because not only could I not get a flight, but they have these comfortable buses, which they call are like, cama bus, like
Bus
bed
cama.
bus, bus cama, whatever. And that was, if you can't fly, that's a halfway acceptable mode of transportation. But even those were booked because everybody's coming back for the holiday. It's, again, kind of like Thanksgiving, everybody going home for the holidays. And anyways, I ended up taking that 2 days later, which was actually quite comfortable.
How long
They
is
lay
the ride?
flat?
They lay flat. You leave at 7:30. You're in Loja at like 5:30 in the morning. So it's 10 hours. They don't stop. It's nonstop. And you
That's
just
quick.
sleep. Like they've got a TV. They've got a blanket. They've got, it folds all the way down, like all the way down.
Nice.
It's pretty decent if you ever get stuck without a flight. 10 hours. I think I slept probably 8 of them. Could have been worse.
Nice,
Oh, That
nice.
sounds good, actually.
How much did it cost
It's $45 the sleeper bus.
per ticket?
Per ticket,
Okay.
per each way, per person each way.
Yeah, and the Quito flights,
It's 80.
just for perspective, is like 80. Yeah, a little over 80, right?
80
with
per
taxes,
person each way, yeah.
Interesting.
No, the 80 includes the taxes.
Oh, is that with
Yeah.
the taxes?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, 10 hours seems quick. I thought I went to
Yeah.
Quito before from Vilcabamba. I left, and I thought it was at least 12 hours.
I was
Maybe a little more.
expecting 12, so
Yeah.
I was surprised. I guess it's the middle of the night. There's no,
Yeah, they don't stop. To pick
they don't
people up.
stop, yeah.
They might have
And
a
apparently
bigger engine.
they punch it a little bit, yeah. So that wasn't too bad. But yeah, so I'm at a hotel in Quito, and I'm there. Let's see, it would have been like maybe a Tuesday, I think, that I flew there, and then Thursday that I left. The hotel was empty for Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday the entire world showed up at this hotel outside of Quito, and I almost felt bad I was leaving. It looked like it was going to be a really fun weekend of sort of upper middle to upper class Lojanos Quiteños who came out to this countryside. Calling it a resort would be generous, but a place that has pickleball courts and nice spa and sauna and steam room and pool table.
Nice.
and it had a lot of history. It's like a several 100-year-old I don't know if hacienda would be the right word, but place there that is kind of in its original state. You know, it's got all the adobe and the wood,
Nice.
and you know, record players that are 100 years old and old
Nice.
telephones.
Is
Yeah.
it actually in the city of Quito? Or is it in
It was in
Talavera?
Puembo,
Puembo. Okay.
which
So,
is about 15 minutes from the
oh,
airport
right,
towards Quito, but still 30 minutes outside of Quito or
right,
so.
right.
Quito is just, I mean, it's a massive, absolutely massive city.
Yeah.
There's still all this undeveloped land I was looking at around Quito, just kind of chatting with the taxi driver, and I was asking him, you know, what's up with all that land that's undeveloped? Is it because it's protected? Because I know Quito, they don't have a lot of space. You know, it's in the mountains. He was saying, yeah, that a lot of the mountains they've stopped the ability to develop, so it still has, you know, kind of some beautiful woods
Nice.
in the surrounding mountains around Quito. But yeah, man, it's a massive city. It's so funny. It's gotten to the point in my life where just being in a city for an hour, like I just want to get out. And I'm a city boy. Like I love the city. But
Yeah, yeah.
but
That's kind of
anyways,
the same, man. Like
yeah.
the further, you know, I grew up in the city, and I always thought I'd move back to the city when I was, you know, we moved to the suburbs as I got older, and I always thought I was going back to the city. And then the older I get, the further out of the city I want to be. Maybe I'm just a curmudgeon, but
It's funny
like
how
you,
that is.
yeah. But I don't know. Have you lived in a big city ever?
For a short amount of times.
Yeah.
Where I'm from is like 60,000 people.
Okay.
It's like a larger town. I've lived in Quebec City. I've lived in Montreal very sparsely, Victoria, British Columbia, but not for long periods of time. But I don't typically enjoy living in a city. I mean, everything's far. Well, depends what you're looking for, but like, you know, traveling from one end to the other end of the city takes hours sometimes, right?
It can.
And
Yeah, all the hassles that go along. I mean, I think in Quito you can only drive on certain days based on your license plate number to keep traffic
Oh, it's
down.
that
Still?
congested.
I believe within.
Wow.
I don't think it's the whole city, but I think there's a. Correct me, guys. Correct me out there, Quiteños. Tell me what the story is on this. But I believe that permanently within a certain section of the city, like the most congested, you have certain days based on your license plate number that you're allowed to drive. And I don't know if that's the whole city or if that's just a piece of it, but
Interesting.
you know, all the hassles. I mean, in New York, where I'm from, you know, you're gonna get, if you drive regularly, which a lot of people don't, but like if you live in the boroughs and you drive regularly, you're gonna get a ticket close to monthly no matter what you do. Like there's no strategy for not getting occasional tickets, and the tickets, you know, you might, this is 12 years ago, they're probably more now. Your minimum ticket's going to be like 60, 80 bucks, but usually it's more like 150, 250, depending on the infraction.
Fun.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
No thanks.
Well, it's interesting too. Well, actually, before I get into that, so I'm in Puembo, which is, you know, it's a suburb, I suppose, of Ecuador. They don't really have suburbs in this country to speak of. So I don't know if suburb's really the right word, but it's the equivalent of a suburb of a city. From back home, you know, not a particularly upscale or not upscale town. Like it's definitely not a place where clearly people with money have gone, and so that's reflected in prices. It's just a very regular, you know, town. And I was just, for curiosity, I was just kind of checking out prices of lots in that area. They're asking $180 a square meter for 2,500 square meter lots in this little town outside of Quito called Puembo, which is about 15 minutes from the airport. I mean, for $180 a square meter in this region, you're squarely into the city. Like you can get city lots that are 200 square meters, not everywhere in the city, but like the little bit towards the edges of the city. $150, $200 a square meter is pretty common. In the towns here, that's the only place you'd spend that kind of money would be closer to the town center. You know, anything that's not right in town, you know, in this area, or even in Vilcabamba, which is super expensive comparatively to other towns that are in this region, you know, you're still looking at $20, $30 a square meter for a 2,500 square meter lot.
For a larger lot, yeah, for sure.
And they're asking $180.
Wow.
But there's a lot of money up there. I mean, that's like it's a legit city.
I mean, that's a capital city, right?
It's capital city.
So yeah, that's a huge. Do you know the size of the city offhand?
It's like 2-3 million people, I think.
Yeah, that's way different. way different ballpark.
Yeah, I just did the math because I couldn't think clearly, but that's 450 grand for a 2,500 square meter lot.
Wow.
$450,000. It seems really high. It was probably they sell smaller lots in that area. It just happened to be some bigger
Perhaps. I
ones
mean,
left.
it's a town. Like, it's not a city. So the lots, I don't know what the zoning is up there, but I was coming across a lot of 2,500 square meter lots. So I assume that probably is a
common.
zoning thing where that is
Interesting.
either the minimum or at least in some places.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't do a deep dive on it, but I was surprised. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of, there's real international business interest in Quito. It's an international city. Things are a lot more expensive. Like, I don't think it's any different than if you're in, rural Vermont, where I'm from, for example, and you look at prices, and then you go into Manhattan and look at prices.
Yeah.
They're very, very different. Life is much more expensive in the large cities. I think it's the same here. Loja, the prices of Loja versus Quito, even restaurants and all that kind of stuff, is very different. Taxi rides are much more expensive. Yeah. So.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to touch a little bit on, because that's an interesting concept, just, people from the West and, my friends and family I'll speak for, they kind of think that Ecuador is this, tin roof, dirt floors, everybody's poor. And don't get me wrong, like, yes, a lot of people live at a very low lifestyle, very low wage. But that's anywhere in the world too, right? There's way more poor people anywhere in the world than there are elsewhere. But for some reason, they don't understand that Ecuador has caste or classes of lifestyle as well here, and that it's way more common. Like, for example, like, I know way more Ecuadorians in this area that own more than one home, not just as a rental, like that they actually, because I know people in the States, they have rental properties and they do it as a business, as income. Not that they have two homes, like they have a vacation home and a regular home that they share time between, or a third home but here in Ecuador, I know way more people that have that situation, that yes, they have rentals too, but they actually own multiple homes here. Like, that's like, I don't know if people understand that. Like, there are Ecuadorians, I see Ecuadorians with nice cars all the time in Vilcabamba, all the time, like really nice cars, like multiple homes. It's just somehow like the perception is that everybody is dirt poor.
Yeah.
And in being here for 2 years, it's not the case. They literally have multiple homes and nice cars. Again, not everybody, that's not what I'm saying, but it just seems like the perception of that from the outside for people that haven't been there is that it's the opposite of that. I don't know. Is that?
I mean, it's a pretty modern country for the most part. I think if we were to take a wealth distribution curve, it would probably be on a different scale, of course, because the cost of living is completely different.
Right.
But in terms of wealth versus cost of living, or income versus cost of living, that ratio and then that distribution on that curve, or is probably the same. It's probably almost the same,
Right,
as to what the U.S. or other quote unquote developed countries would be. But yeah, I think that is a huge misnomer. I mean, Ecuador has all the infrastructure. So if you touch down in Quito at the airport, I mean, it's a gorgeous international airport. It's not a third world airport at all. And then you hop on the highway and you're flying into Quito on a 4-lane, highway, or you're staying at a hotel that's just like any hotel in the world. But that's just, I'm using that as an example. But the infrastructure in the country is like that. So roads, internet, electricity. The internet here might be better than back home.
Yeah.
Like the country's internet infrastructure might be better than back home.
Yeah, well, I can attest to that. I lived in the country. I lived about 2 hours out of the city. We lived on a rural property that was 5 acres. We were surrounded by farm. We couldn't see our neighbors. We were relatively rural. But it's, 25, 30 minutes to get into like a city, like something equivalent of like Loja. My internet here, I was up into the valley in the mountains, in the canyon, and I had fiber optic to the house in the middle of the mountains with epic views. The internet was 100 times better than what I had in the rural area. Like they didn't even have fiber to where I lived. I had to do satellite. I tried multiple different things, but the internet is way more reliable and way faster here than where I last spent the last 5 years in the United States. So that's a fact. Yeah.
No, and to your point, like I think a lot of those misnomers that people have, sort of false perceptions about places they haven't been. It doesn't have to be Ecuador, right? It could be anywhere. Like I've never been to Africa.
Right.
Like I have ideas in my head. I don't know. I've never been there. They're probably all wrong, right?
Right.
Like Asia. I've never been to Asia. Like I don't, So whatever those perceptions are that you have. I mean, all right, I'll embarrass myself for a second. The first time I had never been to Latin America, and about 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in there, I went to Venezuela with my ex-wife who's Venezuelan to visit her family. I was expecting like Mexicans, which I've never been to Mexico, so I probably have that wrong also. But I was expecting like Mexicans out of the movies.
Right.
Like that's the crap that was in my head from movies, basically, because I had never been to these
like which
places.
movies?
No, I mean I'm expecting like tacos and burritos, which I don't even know if they. I guess they do that in Mexico, but they're different than what we call it. But like I was expecting like stereotypes that, and I get off the plane in this Latin American country, and there's every single race is highly represented. Venezuela, it's a little different on the east coast of South America than it is the west coast because they had slavery on the countries that were on the east. They mostly had slavery. The countries on the west, they mostly didn't. So there's a further mixing of races in places like Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, those kinds of countries where there aren't as much in, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, things like that. But so in Venezuela, you have the whitest white to the darkest black and everything in between. You've got, people eat all kinds of different food.
Yeah.
It's just normal life, normal people like you should expect, anywhere. But if you haven't been there and you've just grown up on Hollywood movies, you have no idea. And I think that's true about Ecuador as well. We have this, I think some people from the West have this sort of false belief about Latin America and maybe other places where it's like, they're all poor, they need our help. They're all poor, they need our help. And it's kind of a shit show, like the way the country, I mean, if you're not putting things on a scale, then that's true, right? So if you say like, okay, well, your average, what's your average hourly wage back home? Probably $20 an hour or something, $25 an hour. Your average hourly wage here is like $2.50, $3, an hour. So by that, you're going to say, very poor country. Well, what's your average lunch cost back home? $15, $20, $10, at a restaurant, your average lunch. What is your average lunch cost here? $2.50, $2. So actually, if you look at just that ratio, people might make more money per hour comparatively in terms of their spending power than someone makes back home per hour. Right. You're going to spend a larger percentage of that 1 hour on lunch back home or a similar one than to what you're going to pay here. So if you look at it in a vacuum, you might say, okay, just look at the raw numbers. You might say, okay, everyone's poor. When you look at life here versus life there, it's not that way at all.
Right.
And because there's so much less debt in the system, like we talked about last week, people tend to have a more comfortable lifestyle in many ways. Now the culture's different. So people don't show their wealth the way they do back home. So like those people you're talking about, like how many people can we think of in town, some of the, the Ecuadorian families here that own multiple properties, multiple business properties, they rent out, in many cases they'll have a whole block, like that family kind of owns that block.
And you'd never be able to pick them out from a lineup.
Ever. Ever. Like they might not even have a car if they choose not to. Right. Or if they do, whatever, they don't care. They wear a regular t-shirt, they do everything as normal as you can. Some of these folks have multi-million-dollar bank accounts, multi-million-dollar property portfolios, and that's not uncommon at all. Right. People here, it's as normal a place in terms of that stuff as you can get. People make money, they have second homes.
It's kind of refreshing that way because you can go talk to anybody and you don't have that feeling like oh, this is a big shot. Like
No.
you still, you'll have that respect, but you don't have that, like when you're ever getting in a room with like a really big, that's going to show you how big they are and
No one here
all
would
the
ever do
fancy
that.
watches and make sure that they've got the finest suit and and they want you to know that they know and like that doesn't happen here. And maybe in the big cities it does. I don't know. I don't have an experience there. Maybe there's some level of that in
Sure.
Quito or
Yeah,
but
probably in the
around
bigger
here,
cities.
I mean, it's not like that. It's refreshing. It's
Yeah.
normal. It's comfortable. It's nice.
Yeah. I was gonna say Loja's a small city also compared to Guayaquil and Quito, so everyone knows each other. It's kind of has more of a like a community feel probably than Guayaquil.
Definitely.
4 million people, And I would say the wealth, also the way the wealth is distributed in Ecuador, and correct me if I'm wrong, if any of the viewers know better, but there's certain areas that just have way more wealth than others. Like if you go to a very remote agricultural area where there's no tourism and stuff, like that's where people typically don't have a lot of money, right? They live very simple lives. They don't have fancy cars or fancy homes. The coast tends to be have less wealth than the mountains as well. So if you go in the surrounding areas of the coast in general, but just around Guayaquil, you got these banana farms and cacao farms and mango plantations, and that's where you see like people live in huts almost, like wooden houses with tin roofs basically, and and dirt floor, like you said. But in this area, there's actually a lot of wealth, in Loja as well. Quito, same.
Yeah, no, I mean that's an important distinction but you can of course find that in the States as well.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like if you went looking for third world poverty, you can find it here. Of course, you can also find it in
New York City,
Mississippi and
Chicago.
Louisiana.
You find it in big cities.
And and well, especially with the homeless
They got tent cities.
problem.
Like
yeah. But you're right. Like the region we're in is different. It's a different region it's a big region, right? I would argue it includes the whole province and other provinces.
Yeah.
A lot of the Sierra, like you mentioned. In these regions, yeah, it's different, man. It's just something different about the way the way people what people come from in their lineage and their pride about their lineage and about their culture and about their lives. These are serious people, man. Whatever they're doing, whether they're planting corn for a living out in some of these rural areas, or they're a metal worker, or they're a bus driver, it's like from that level of society, or they're a lawyer, doctor, engineer, business owner from that level, but regardless, they tend to have their lives pretty well set up. Yeah. They take a lot of pride in what they do. They tend to, care about what you think of them, and therefore they show up in a certain way. It's good. Like it's a good, I don't know, society, I guess.
Yeah, community.
Community. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the backbone in a way of, or maybe some of the underpinnings of why the community feels real here. Because it's ingrained in the culture. Like that's part of the way people inherently are here. They're not really putting on an act. That's just the way they do life. That's the lifestyle here. And that's different from a lot of places we come from. And, or at least for me, for sure, it's way different than anywhere I've ever lived in the West. And it's really refreshing. Yeah.
I had a couple of interesting data points. These are not to be taken with a grain of salt, of course, because this is not exactly aggregate data, right? But a couple of interesting data points that came from, I have a couple of taxi drivers whose number is in my phone when I'm at the airport and so I was driving with a couple of different taxis when I was up there, and I was chatting with them about Quito and the safety and the elections and these kinds of things. It was kind of interesting. So both of the taxi drivers said that everybody wanted Villavicencio, which was interesting because, as I've mentioned on this pod, and this was the candidate who was assassinated a few months back, the people that I go to who tell me my political opinions in Ecuador told me to vote for Villavicencio. And then these taxi drivers, which are from those are like middle class kind of people here, were saying that as well, which I found interesting. And then they were also telling me that things have really calmed down, that the safety is better since the election than it was when Villavicencio got killed, for example. So that's hopeful, and they both they both were of the opinion, the taxi drivers were both of the opinion that the cartels killed Villavicencio, but that the cartels were in bed with not Alianza País, so it's Revolución Ciudadana, and that they didn't want Villavicencio for those reasons, but both were very hopeful that Noboa would kind of follow through on a similar. They both felt. Ecuadorians know. They tend to know. It's not like us back home where everyone has an opinion and no one has the actual ability to know. It's much smaller here. People tend to actually know kind of what's going on to a larger degree. And yeah, they both think that Noboa will be sincere in his effort to go against the cartels and kind of stomp that out. We'll see. They were also mentioning, I was asking them, like, what's the closest beach to here? Is it sort of the Esmeraldas area, Pedernales in that area? And they were kind of explaining where people go. And he was saying, yeah, like, you can't really go to Esmeraldas anymore. It's so dangerous. And he was telling me, that was never the case. He was telling me we all used to go to Esmeraldas, where everyone in Quito used to go to the beach was up in that, like, Mompiche and those areas. And that right now they're not. And, he kind of lamenting the change in security on that northern coastal town, which is maybe the worst probably in the country, perhaps.
One of the
Esmeraldas, probably.
The last data that we saw from 2023, Esmeraldas was one of the highest, like, murder per capita, if not the highest, I think, in the whole country.
Yeah, probably the highest.
Have you been up there?
I know it's the one, like literally maybe the only part of the country I have not been to. So I've been up the coast to Pedernales. That's the furthest north I've gotten. I've never made it up to actually Esmeraldas, like Mompiche and those areas. Some of the nicest beaches I have. Some of the nicest beaches.
You know what's wild about that Esmeralda data? So that's like the most dangerous place. It still wasn't even in the top 10 most dangerous, or top 20 dangerous or murder per capita in the country. Like, there was nine Mexican cities in Mexico. There was 2 or 3 cities in the United States, and they were all higher than Esmeraldas from the recent data. So it's just interesting to see, like, wow, that's the most dangerous, and it's not even in the top 20.
Yeah. We had some rumors which somewhat turned out to be true about planned power outages in Ecuador. It's kind of interesting, right? So Ecuador gets a good chunk of its electricity from hydroelectric. They have these huge hydroelectric dams, plants, whatever you call them. Mostly, I understand, mostly in the Amazonian region, I believe. There may be some as well in the Sierra, but they get a good chunk of their electricity from that. And apparently with El Nino, and we're coming out of dry season, some of the water levels are too low to produce enough power. So they had announced that we're going to have some power outages in certain regions, including this one. And then I love this country. This is always how everything works, right? And everyone's freaking out, of course. All the foreigners are freaking out.
Well, no one else was.
No,
it was
of
just
course.
the gringos,
no.
man.
Ecuadorians know that everything just gets sorted out. Like, Ecuadorians just live their life that way. Yeah. We freak out, So, and then I guess one of the, I think it was one of the Canadian mining companies offered to turn on their generators and produce enough power, at least for this region. And I think there was some other
all of Zamora
one of the companies.
And Loja is what I hear.
Yeah.
They were.
And I think one of the other companies that's producing, like, solar power said they could double their output. And so we've been full power, and then I guess it's been raining a little bit. So hopefully now that's over, we'll see. But
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you called in a favor, right? Your Canadian compadres.
Right.
Yeah.
Ludwig Gold.
Ludin,
nice.
Ludin, yeah.
Ludin, yeah, nice.
Ludin Gold, yeah.
Thanks, Carl.
Probably Ludin, we would say back home or something, huh? Ludin here.
Ludin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The generators, they're powered with diesel or something. Do you know? Like, what did they
That's
use?
what I had heard, but I don't know.
A lot of diesel. Power, like, 2.
For the mining companies to get a little goodwill. Yeah, because a lot of people hate the mining companies.
Right.
Or maybe they had to stop their operations otherwise, or there may be something they were going to lose money. But I guess they have the generators, so they definitely got the favor of the people at this point.
Yeah. So that we got that going on, and it kind of leads me into the point. One of the reasons 9 years ago or whatever I started putting out videos was because I realized after having been here for a year or two that the English language information both in the country and outside of the country was just terrible in terms of accuracy. So I would see these videos on YouTube, but then almost more importantly, I would hear foreigners around Vilcabamba in particular who there's like this sort of echo chamber, you know, sort of rumor mill in Vilcabamba. It's a small town. Maybe that's true in other places. I don't know. But it's definitely, maybe it's heightened here because people are living in a foreign country, don't necessarily speak the language or understand the culture. And so.
And we're in a social media society as well. Like, so people, you know, they're on Facebook and they're spreading stuff and there's no due diligence on things like that.
Is it true or not?
Right. Yeah. It's really easy to kind of hyperbolize things. Yeah. It's almost commonplace anymore. Yeah. Like everything's hyperbole. Everything, you know.
Right.
You see the irony there? Everything's hyperbole.
But yeah, but like that, so that was one of the things that bothered me. Like once I'd been here a couple of years and I spoke Spanish, and I'm in Loja at the time, so I'm hooked in with Ecuadorians. Like I'm not hanging out with foreigners socially at that time or just interacting on a day-to-day basis. The only foreigners at that time I'm interacting with are folks like calling from overseas asking about Ecuador, right? And I'm seeing like what I see on Facebook in the Vilcabamba groups, what I see in some of those emails that go around, and then what I would hear from people when I'd come to Vilcabamba versus what I knew to be true. And then, or half the time I'm like, really? You know, and it would be crazy rumors, you know, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And I'd pick up the phone and just call a friend in Loja and, hey, do you know anything about this? And they'd be like, oh yeah, it's this, it's nothing, don't worry. Like, you know, it would be very different story versus what people would have in their heads here. And so, you know, part of the power outage thing kind of speaks to that, because you know, everyone in this community is having full-blown, not everyone, but people are having full-blown freak out moments, and then you've got all these people sharing information that clearly don't have a source that's reliable for the information they're sharing. And then you end up both locally and internationally, if you're just reading articles or paying attention to groups or forums, or you have this kind of, whatever the news of the day is, you have these wild rumors, and then you have people freaking out about it. And it's, if that's your only source of information, you've got information on Ecuador. You know, if you either find a good source online, talk to someone who's actually lived here a long enough time, speaks the language. Like that's super important. Like there's just no way you can really know what's going on here until you fluently speak Spanish and can talk to people who actually would have the information easily. Otherwise, you're going off of he said, she said, and usually the basis of that he said, she said is false. Like,
right.
Yeah. I think also it's based on what region you're going to visit, right? Because the different regions in Ecuador have different situations. For example, there are power outages in other regions. We just happen to be lucky here that we don't have those, but there are other areas of Ecuador that actually are having power outages, you know, still. So,
yeah, the freak out thing is interesting because last night, you know, we should talk about the Thanksgiving event too. How much time we got here, guys? Yeah, 10, 15 minutes. So let's talk about the Thanksgiving event that we're doing. And this can maybe be a nice segue into that, because last night there was a citizens assembly meeting, and the captain of the Vilcabamba Bomberos, is that how you say it, Carl? Bomberos. So the firefighters. And then I think the first lieutenant, or I forget, there was another ranking woman in the.
Yeah, I think he was actually a lieutenant.
Or he was a lieutenant
specifically, and she was under him. I don't know her role yet.
Right. So they came up and they spoke at the Citizens Assembly, because the Citizens Assembly is working with all the different risk management facilities, like the firefighters, the police, all the different aspects of government for emergency response, right? So we had a relatively dry season, so we had fires. Some of them got out of control, and then we're heading into rainy season, and we're talking about like potential for mudslides, but just really putting plans in place so that people know what to do if they see something like this, who to call. Like there's 911 in Ecuador. Most people don't know that. Literally,
there wasn't when I got here.
Really?
At least
There
in
is
this
now.
region, it had like just come out. It was
Yeah.
like coming, but it didn't work at least in this region at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
So 911 is like the first thing you do. So then it registers in the system, and then things get recorded as an event, and there are processes in place so that things happen. But the point I want to make is that this firefighter, she gets up and she's speaking about exactly what you were just talking about, saying like the difference in the culture in regard to panics and to these emergency events, and that and she gave the anecdote, like an Ecuadorian that's lived here their whole life, they see a mountain, the mountain ridge on fire, and they're not freaking out. They're not throwing things on Facebook and reporting in WhatsApp groups and calling for help and all that. Like they know what to do, and they're not in panic. And it's all the gringos, it's all the foreigners that aren't used to seeing a mountain top on fire, that are the ones that are creating this panic and this undue stress and freaking out. And she was really trying to explain that in a way that like, hey, like, we this is part of the culture. We know this is. Yes, some of them get out of hand like fires anywhere, but this is a normal part of Ecuadorian culture in the mountains. So don't freak out. Like if you see a fire, call 911, report it, and that's what you do. But when you start organizing and getting people crazy, then things aren't. Then the resources don't flow well. Then it's hard for them to manage. Where do we have to go? Like what's happening? And then they're getting bombarded with all these different people. So it's still awesome that the community comes together. And if there truly is an emergency, that the bomberos help lead it. Like you were part of some of that, right? That was the bomberos leading that charge, Carl, right?
Of course,
Yeah. Right. So it's awesome that community comes together for that. But she was really describing like to try and remain calm and follow the reporting procedure. Call 911 first. If then there are other things you can do if you need to call the bomberos directly. We have all those numbers now, but to really remain calm and then wait for direction, right? Wait for direction from them. And then the other cool thing she talked about was they're working to do education and training classes for locals and children on what to do and what not to do, because there was some misinformation, and then kids see a fire and their parents freak out and the kids go run and hide, Well, they don't want you don't want to hide in those situations, right? Especially if you are relatively close to the fire. So they want to do some education with, what to do and what not to do. And if your help is needed or how you can help, like what are the appropriate steps to help. So it was really cool to see them like really be passionate about it. And like she lives in Aloha, so like they're getting calls at 3 a.m. and they're coming to Vilcabamba, or Malacatos at
Wow.
all hours of the night. They're on call, they're voluntary firefighters,
No,
right?
They get paid.
Oh, they are paid.
Yeah, they're paid.
Oh, they're paid. Okay, I thought they were voluntary.
There might be some
There
volunteers.
might be some
but-
volunteer. I thought she mentioned some volunteer. No, maybe not.
Is that her
Anyway.
name Dora, maybe?
Yeah.
It was Dora.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I met her. She was there that night when we fought the fire in Cucanama.
Yeah, and maybe it's cool to share a little bit of that, the Citizens Council stuff. So
Yeah.
we've touched on this briefly before, but Ecuador rewrote their constitution when I must have been in the first 2 years of Correa. So they had, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Ecuador had maybe 6 or 7 revolutions leading up to 2006. And then Correa took power in 2006, and then they had a constitutional referendum, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, they came up with an entirely new constitution. I believe somewhere around 6 or 7 it would have been. And part of that constitution has all the branches of government, and one of those branches is the Citizens Council, which puts some amount of power and authority at the local level, but outside of elected office. So basically, people can organize and create under the constitutional rules, a Citizens Council and
Citizens
then
Assembly.
Citizens Assembly, and then have a seat at the table on really all decision making.
Right, and that's a really cool thing to add. Like there's at all these municipal and governmental meetings, they have in Ecuador they have this rule called the open chair. So they have, or the open seat. So there's always an open. There's a procedure that you have to follow in order to get a seat at the table. But the Citizens Assembly understands that and whatever. But the cool thing is that there's always a seat, so you can follow the procedure to go have a seat at the decision maker's table, which is really cool. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, really just that. And so it's kind of interesting, some of that stuff in the Constitution. You know, Ecuador, the Constitution goes very far out of its way to protect rights and interests
Of the people.
of the people. So,
Right.
you know, indigenous rights in particular, and natural rights, and
Ancestral medicine.
right. Medicine in general that's kind of amazing. Yeah. That's actually in the Constitution. That's protected. And they've actually done some work, some successfully, utilizing the Constitution to push back against some different types of medical mandates that we've seen pop up here over the last few years, based on these guaranteed rights and freedoms that are in the Constitution. But yeah, so Vilcabamba has probably one of the only citizens, assemblies in the country. There's, I think, a few others,
anyway.
but yeah.
No, I mean, Loja has
Loja
one.
has one.
Cities have them.
Oh, the
but
cities have one.
It's uncommon in the rural areas.
Yeah. So they're trying to organize that here and have, you know, a little more say over what goes on here locally.
Right, and they've done some cool things already since they've started, where, you know, we had that rash of home invasions, you know, however long ago that was, and there was a crew running through, and the Citizens Assembly was able to get I think it was the general of the military, of the Navy, the police chiefs from Loja, the whole province, like very high-ranking officials, into a meeting, and they said, "How can we help?" Like, they needed help, and
in Vilcabamba.
They came to Vilcabamba, right? And not only that, that's why the whole police department employees changed. Yeah. All the police in Vilcabamba were replaced with new employees, new police officers through the work that the Citizens Assembly did through following the process, you know, because they're a parallel, you know, foot of the government, you know, which is pretty impressive, right?
It's kind of wild.
It's wild.
Imagine, you know, let's use equivalent numbers. Let's say a 60 to 80,000 person town in the U.S. has a little crime, you know, has some kind of crime uptick.
Right.
And the Citizens Assembly, you know, makes a phone call, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, the top general in the military, you know, calls a meeting, brings their whole team, and sits in the town square, you know, some office in the town, talking with a group of citizens, and then takes action. I mean, it's really remarkable.
It's awesome. And the cool thing about the Citizens Assembly is it's a mix. It's gringos and Ecuadorians. Like, you have key stakeholders in the community that are on the board. You know, Marisol's on the board. You know, she's Vicente's on the board, and there's gringos on the board. So it's a mix. It's truly like a shared responsibility and a shared culture, you know, cultural, I don't know, asset, I would say at this point. So that's cool. Yeah. And the reason we were there is that, you know, we're doing the Thanksgiving event, you know, later this month. So, you know, last year when we did the event, we fed around 1,000 people. This year we're trying to feed, you know, more than that. Our goal is to feed 1,500 people. And anybody who's made food for that amount of people, you know, it's a process, right? There's not any large scale commercial kitchen in Vilcabamba that can just process food like that. So, you know, it's cliche, but to pull something off like that, it truly takes a village, right? It takes people working together, and families and restaurants and cooking and you know, peeling potatoes and cutting vegetables, and it's really the whole village comes together to do that, to be able to feed people like that. But it's a really cool thing that, you know, that we can partner with a group like the Citizens Assembly and with the mayor, Victor Carpio, and bring an event like this to the community in Vilcabamba, where we're feeding people. We're having, you know, the best pianist in Vilcabamba, Jimmy, come and play music. We've got live music. We've got the leadership group, which is like the teenage aged youth in the area. They come and they're going to perform and do games and hand out treats for kids. So it's gonna be a fun event, and the elders will line up and for meals, and sometimes they'll get served if we don't make them wait in line. So it's just like this really cool special thing. We do it right in front of the church, and it feels really good to be able to give back, because like all of us we left a country that we were born in and we came here, and I know for me, my family has felt really grateful and thankful that we've been accepted into the community. And, my son's playing soccer with mostly Ecuadorians, and Belle's doing, dance with mostly Ecuadorians, and they've really just accepted them. So as a father, like seeing that is just like, they're not shunned, they're not outcast, they're like part of the community. Like, I'm getting choked up, man, but like, it makes me feel like I want to give back in a way, and, be thankful that they've accepted us. And yeah, it's a token, like, but it's still meaningful. It's like the symbol of thank you for accepting us, and because they don't celebrate Thanksgiving here, so it's cool to kind of bring that over, and it's just a time, a reason to be thankful, and we can do that together as a community. So
we'll put a link in the description of last year's events.
Yeah,
if people haven't seen
cool.
it on our channel. It was pretty nice.
Yeah.
We'll
And if you'd like, if you'd like to contribute to help support that event, we'll put a link below where you can contribute if you'd like to support it. We had some folks on YouTube that supported last year, so if you'd like to do that, that'd be grateful. Well, all the money stays in the community.
Of course.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a funny anecdote that will scare people, so I shouldn't share it, but I'm gonna anyway. It's an example of what I love about this country, but it's also an example. It's an extreme example of something that is, I hold dear to, is near and dear to me, which is that, and we've talked about it many times, but which is that the people here, la gente, right? Like the people actually have a lot of power here, and know it and care about it and maintain it. Not that there's necessarily always, or even often at all, a struggle between the people and their power, and the government and their power. There's not ongoing really anything there, but it is a fact that people here have a lot of power. They have a lot to say. They care about their lives. They are in charge of their lives. They're going to make sure that things are kind of the way they want them to be. So I copied and pasted this article from a few weeks ago. It's just it's short, the part that I put here. So police investigate deaths of suspected vaccinators in Cotopaxi. So Latin America has a problem which was never in Ecuador previously ever, but I understand was a difficult problem in Venezuela, perhaps Colombia. I think Colombia as well, maybe other countries, I don't know. With the cartels coming in a bit in the last however many years, and then there being a big immigration wave over the last few years, this has started to pop up in Ecuador, where people will basically go around to a business and be like, give us money every month or we're going to shoot you, right? That's kind of and very rarely do you actually, they don't actually, you don't hear a lot of cases where people actually got killed by these folks, but it does exist. It's become a thing. And so autopsies are being conducted on the bodies of two men beaten and burned by an angry crowd Saturday night in La Mana in the Cotopaxi province. According to local residents, the men were extortionists or vaccinators who had been threatening local businesses. Police say the men, who identified as residents of Guayaquil, were surrounded by a crowd who beat them before dousing them with gasoline and setting them on fire. A third man was badly burned and is being treated at a hospital in Ambato. When police attempted to stop the attack, they were driven back by a crowd estimated to number 1,000. 2 police vehicles were badly damaged in the altercation. Wow. So, I'm not trying to laugh about people getting burned alive. That's wild.
But it happens.
That's tragic.
It happens. That's not the only instance. The indigenous people.
Very occasionally, you'll hear about something like this.
Yeah. Right.
But again, like, there's something cool about it. You know, like these folks, no one's probably going to get caught or punished at all for this. Very likely this is going to go down as a, you know, the community taking care of itself. It's very unlikely there's going to be a large investigation to figure out, you know, what people were involved in actually, you know, actually killing these folks. But again, you know, I would say in La Mana, which I think is, it says it's Cotopaxi province, but I think that's closer to the coast, La Mana, is going to have, probably not going to have a problem with that
Right.
anytime
Right.
soon.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one of the things I appreciate about this country is
No,
that
it's great.
people take care of their communities and you know,
Sure.
take care of their business in that
Yeah,
way.
and there are people in Vilcabamba who would do the same, for sure. I believe so. I mean, I'm on those WhatsApp groups that I've mentioned before, the security groups, and whenever, you know, there was something, I forget what it was, but there was some suspicious activity going on, and some community members were like, let's find these guys and, you know, burn them, basically burn their motorcycles or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, when that last rash of crime happened, I remember Jesse called me. He's like, "Grab your baseball bat and picking you up." So I grabbed my bat, and at first I'm like, "Oh, all right, let's go get these guys." And then we get to the house, and at first I'm like, "All right, we're just gonna scare somebody if we have to." Like that's where my mind was. We're not gonna really beat anybody. And then the Ecuadorians that were there, they had machetes and they were like, we got to catch him. And they were talking about like chopping their arms off and got to teach them a lesson. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm looking and I'm like, whoa, they're not joking.
they're not kidding.
They're not kidding. They really want to teach a lesson. So this stops,
Yeah.
which is wild. But it's in a weird way, like that's powerful, right? That's powerful. Is a powerful deterrent for people wanting to commit crimes in this area. And that's, I guess, you know, when you think about that stuff and some of the stuff that the Citizens Assembly is trying to do and kind of organize some of that communication, that's helpful, man, because the people care and the stuff that Darren and Beatrice are really kind of leading through that assembly it's helpful for everybody. It's helpful for anybody that moves here, local or extranjero. Some of that stuff is, you know, just being to have the comfort to know who to call, where to call, you know, and then supporting the police department and the bomberos and getting their vehicles fixed. You know, like the province of Loja, there was you know 50 some police cars in the shop in the government shop waiting to get fixed.
Oh, wow.
So when Vilcabamba's police car had an issue, they have to go to Loja, you know, per the procedure to get fixed, and there are 50 cars in front of them. Well, we had that rash of crime, and we don't have very many police cars. It's like we need our police car now. We don't want to wait. We need somebody that can react. So that's the Citizens Assembly fixes the car so that we have a police department that can actually, you know, react when they need to, fixes the motorcycle. So stuff like that, you know, it sounds little and trivial, but it's really powerful to the community and important to the community because it actually makes them feel safe and it helps communicate what to do and how to act in those situations.
Yeah, and the police are not revenue generators for the state, so that allows also for those relationships to be very different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the police here are literally there to protect you. Like they're actually there for your safety, not to give you a ticket because you forgot to put your turn signal on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different relationship than it would be back home. Yeah. All right, I know, Brandon, you got to get out of here. Any last words, guys, before we wrap up?
I would just quick anecdote on the police and stuff, right? Just to kind of showcase some of that. I went to Zumba a few days ago last week, and on the way back, I mean, there were a lot of people kind of hitchhiking on the side of the road and stuff, and I would put them in the back of the truck. And at some point, we were going between Palanda and Valladolid, I think, and there was a lady, and you know, she wanted to ride, but I said, well, can you go in the back? And I knew there were transitos sometimes, transit police on the way. So anyways, I'm like, but what about the transitos? The transit police, are they not gonna, you know, bother me if they're? And she's like, oh no, I know them, no problem, I'll talk to them. And that happens all the time, right? It's kind of very, you know, I've had people tell me like, oh, if the transitos stop, you just give me a call, you know, I'll talk to them.
100%. I've utilized that more than once.
Priceless.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, when they had the lockdowns during COVID, there was this short period of time where life was things were a pain here, and there were certain provinces or even cantons, I think, that were under different security levels, you know, like red or green or whatever the crap they were using. And I didn't know it, but I had traveled to, I didn't know that the canton in Gonzanama was in a different security level than the canton of Loja where we live. And so I had driven on the back road through Porunuma to Gonzanama, gone to Gonzanama for the day, done what I needed to do. Then I'm coming back, and this little back road in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you've probably been on that road. Like, there's no, I mean, you see a car every 20 minutes. They had a gate and a freaking cop, and he wouldn't let me get home. And they're supposed to take the car and all that. He wasn't going to do all that, but he's like, you're not getting through here. So I'm like, okay, he wants a few bucks. That's normally how that goes. He wouldn't take a bribe, which is unheard of here. Like, I'm offering him money, and he's telling me, like, stop doing that. Like, you're trying to bribe me. I'm not letting you through. I don't know if it was the first day on the job or what, but it was very strange.
People were really worried
So
about the
then
COVID
I had a real problem because there's no hotels in Gonzanama, and after 5 p.m. or something, I'm not even supposed to be driving. Like, I'm not supposed to be driving. The next day is a non-drive day.
Such a rebel.
So like I won't even be able to get home the next day, and there's no hotels in that town. I'm like, I have to get home. I got little kids. So how did I end up solving this problem? I start making I'll call the police department. So they call the police department. They put them in touch with the actual particular officers who would have been on the road between Gonzanama and the turnoff to Tel Tambo to get home the other way. And they'll be like right before the border. So a call gets put into those guys. They give them my information. Hey, you know, do me this favor. This guy's coming through. Let him through. No problem, right? I zip right through, wave to the cops. Thanks, guys. Like, and I'm on my way home. But yeah, it's just indicative of like how those things work here.
Yeah. Well, if you guys made it this far in the video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not. We really appreciate it. It helps us out. We got some new lapel mics, so give us a comment about the audio. How's the audio this time? Is it better? Do you like it? Give us some tips on the audio. We would appreciate that.
On that note, we hope to see you here in Ecuador one day.
So until then,
see you next time.
Ciao, guys.
If you're interested in real estate properties, all of our property videos will now be uploaded on a different channel. Please click the link in the description down below.